Hi everyone, Simon from Horoma Studio. Today I wanted to do a teardown of a school project that I did 2 years ago, something like that, last summer, last winter. It was a very interesting project with very cool people from Montreal that I really enjoyed working with. And I did it with also an illustrator friend that I might actually put the Instagram in the description so that you can check out her work. Either way, very cool project. I want to basically show a little bit the process and talk about the images. There were like a lot of potential cool stuff. We didn't have time to do everything. One thing to notice is that the project was done in 2 phases. So I'm going to show you the first images, the second ones. We did go through both phases, but we unfortunately didn't win the competition. It doesn't happen all the time. So yeah, we'll hopefully you'll find some interesting stuff in there, and let's get started. So the project was a school for little people in a little town in Canada, in Quebec. So basically the idea was that we had this sort of huge, like volume here with a sort of like sports hall, sport court or whatever. The entrance was from there. And these were like different classes with this sort of like very interesting natural light how's it called? Like sky dome or dome, whatever that's called in English. So yeah, pretty fun project and a lot of vegetation around, so pretty fun to play with. So this is the, as I was saying, the project was done in several phases. So there was phase 1. Phase 1 was just a couple of images. So there was this one that was quite fun, and the other one was an interior shot of this thing that was quite cute. I was like, we were all very happy with the image in the sense that there was this sort of like cuteness that we wanted to have, still have like this sort of very strong summer light that is very nice, have like this sort of like fruits and stuff, and have like the little kids playing and having like discussions and playing with this sort of like in between spaces that was happening in between the each volume here. So there was something quite important to show here. So that was the whole thing, and this led us to the second phase. Second phase, we had to do 4 images. So there was still the courtyard one. So this is this one that started from this base here and evolved to this and this and this. So the overall idea, the project changed quite a bit. Here there used to be like a huge stairs that was taking us down, but it disappeared. There was a couple of stuff that sort of changed. One big thing that changed, as you can sort of remember maybe, is that we went from a brick and timber cladding system to a metal cladding system. So it was quite a big change. It was not uninteresting. It was like it was just different, let's say. And the outside was starting to be better designed because they had more time. So there was like a lot of landscaping involved. So this is the first image. We were basically keeping the same point of view as before because it was working pretty well. There was other point of views. I unfortunately don't have them in like the clay renderings, but there was some shots that were like, this was a very interesting project. There was like a lot of subspaces that were worth showing, but we went for like a general view that I think was better. And also because just usually when you do like several phases, you end up at least redoing the main shot to show like the update basically. Here you can see we're going more like for a tonal look. So we're updating the, like the trees, etc., and having more something a little more golden rather than green. Here as well. I was starting to put back some greenery in order to have like better sort of like something a little bit more interesting to look at and not too plain, because really it was this idea of like having high grass, low grass, etc., and this sort of tree here that needed to change. Also, we're starting to detail a little bit the inside. The overall idea, I think, with the final image was really this idea of having something very like pastel colors having like very faint blues. Everything was quite orange and autumnal, as I said. And then the idea was to bring back very saturated points of colors with the kids. So I think this is always a pretty interesting way of working with schools, because it helps you in having like, because kids are always like, not always, but generally they are wearing like, let's say conspicuous colors, conspicuous colors, I don't know how it's pronounced, whatever, but it's a good way of like having a sort of tamed image and to sort of like focus on what's happening and not focus too much on the architecture, because the rest is sort of like properly controlled and properly like laid out, if I may say. So this was like a nice image. If I were to sort of critique it and do changes, I would say this tree doesn't look good and it's way too dark, so there's something that doesn't work there. The point of view in itself, I think, is fine. Wouldn't change it. I think these areas of darkness or shadows are too dark for what we see in the rest of the image. So I would go with something much flatter, basically. So I would have needed like an overcast weather or overcast sky, but I could have kept this sky anyway, because it's very sort of like kind of overexposed. But overall, stuff happening I think are fine. I don't really like, to be honest, when there's a lot happening in the windows, because this is not very realistic, so I tend to not like it. But why not? Why not? So this is for the first image. Second image was a common space. So it was like one of the, not in between space, but like the space that had this very nice upper part that sort of like reflects down the natural light. So first image was like this. I think I like it better than the final one. Second version, third version, fourth version, or final version. How can I say? There's a couple of things I like better with this one. I think for some reason, basically this one feels lighter. So that's the main issue I have with the final one. This one, you can see that the wood is slightly brighter than here. You can see that the background is like quite legible. Here it's kind of okay still. You can see that there's a lot of basically bright spaces everywhere. Whereas here, for instance, it gets super dark, here as well. And the middle is very crowded. I kind of warned the client that we shouldn't do, like, even though the idea is that this space is supposed to become a sort of like extension of the classes or classrooms, and that they can do stuff in the middle, I still think there's a bit too much. Also, one thing is that they're probably not perfectly integrated, and they look a little bit like there's too much contrast in them, and they're a bit too dark. So it sort of really darkens the overall image, which I think is very counterintuitive to the actual feel that you should get in this image or in this space, because it should be very bathed in natural light, and it should be very nice to be in the middle here. And honestly, I think the feel here is actually closer to the actual reality. So that's something that is a bit annoying. One thing I would do, as I said, is that maybe there's like way too much contrast in the wood textures. I would remove most of the people. I think I would get rid of these guys, get rid of all the people in the back, and just keep the sort of tutor with a couple of kids sort of preparing stuff in the sort of like secondary kitchen here. And that way you have like just a sort of one point of focus here instead of having like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And they're literally not bringing much. I mean, when you see a table, you understand that you can use the table. You don't need to put people using the table to understand you can use it. The same way that here, if you put like how's it called, like a tutor desk, you don't need to put the actual tutor here. You can. That's one thing I like with schools, is that they actually have like, they're usually quite messy, but in a cute way, if I may say. So you can, like, if you have like little plants like this and bags, etc., this is already enough to put liveliness or life in your image. You don't need to actually put people. That's why I would keep it very, very minimal. You had like little drawings here. That was a nice touch as well. There's actually, yeah, there were like decisions that were not ideal, I think. So that would be one thing. Like regarding the people, I think is something to always be wary of. What basically, as I was saying, but I'm going to repeat it in a slightly clearer way. Try to, when you want to bring life in an image for a school, try to use, especially for interiors, because it's kind of like quickly crowded, is to use, and when I mean schools, I mean like very schools for like small, like children, not like students, etc. Is to really play with the type of props that you can have and the colorful props that you can have, rather than actually adding people everywhere, because it quickly gets crowded and not really understandable. Here is another image that was done for the, what's the word? The sports hall, basically. This was the first version, second version for fun with a panda, third version, final one that was a little bit, this one got, it's an interesting one, this one, because so here you have really the base with like mostly the point of view and the texturing. Second one here, you can see it gets a bit darker. There's some issues with the textures and we start to have like quite a lot of people. Third one, you can see that we removed quite many of them, but we did still keep like a lot of shit happening. And this guy that is like very, like way too much. This one is nice because even though it wasn't the last one, but I don't have the other version, but whatever. This one is nice because we removed all the people here. There's literally no one in the foreground, which means that you have just this little thing that sort of like works with the basketball here. And you have like a nice framing, like a frame within a frame system where you can sort of see all the children and some mothers and parents in general occupying the space. And you understand the double height system, you understand that there's like stuff here, you know, like from reading the plan that this is a staircase, etc. So there really was a nice, and you can also see that we better understand the depth of the actual space, because before it was a little bit too complicated. And also like they're like adding details in the upper part. So here I think it was a pretty nice image, considering this is interesting because sometimes when you have like a very big space to show, there's not two ways to do it, but two main ways that come to my mind right now is that you can either be in the space and looking at the space and trying to make it look big, or you can be outside from the space looking it through some sort of a window or whatever, and that way you sort of have this frame within a frame system that can generally lead to interesting, interesting composition. One thing with this sort of frame within a frame or like very strong foreground background system that you want to keep in mind is that it's very complicated to have very active foreground plus a very active background, because then generally everything becomes super messy and you don't really read the depth and the complexity of the project. So what you want to do generally is to I think actually you can't really do, like you have to do it that way, because if you have a very active foreground, you generally won't be able to pay much attention to what's happening behind. So you have to find a sort of like, there's probably a sort of a middle ground that you can find where you have like maybe three people, or just like, let's say three people here, and then you can still have people in the background. But generally it's quite nice to have more like, let's say, visual weight on the back, because basically the concept is that if you put visual weight in the foreground and you don't put visual weight in the background, your eyes are basically going to focus on the foreground, and all the background, even though it's an interesting space, is not going to get much attention. So this is something you have to be careful with, or like to be aware of when you're composing. And that's the thing. This is entirely based on the way you place people. I did another video on like how like perception works regarding people. So here it's very interesting because it means that even though your composition or like overall composition or framing makes sense and is potentially interesting, if you place people the wrong way, you're actually going to emphasize the wrong part of your project, and this is something you have to always be very careful of. Bim pam boom. And this is one of the, I think, last image. Took us a while to pick the point of view, but I was very happy with the way it came out. This was the first draft. Second image, a bit clearer, but too many people. Third image, pretty nice. Fourth image, changing a little the background to integrate the existing houses, changing the colors of those like lampposts. There's something I really like about the general color palette, because we have like this very nice transitions between the yellow, brown and green here that we find again in the trees. We have the very fainted sky, the like this sort of interesting autumnal look that is very typical in Canada. So this is something we were really working toward and trying to convey properly. In terms of point of view itself, I think it is working okay, even though it's not the clearest approach of the building. It is still like the way you're actually going to enter the building. So because this is a street with like cars, and here you're actually going here up the stairs and then you're entering on the left. So maybe there was something to do by being slightly closer in order to emphasize the hole here. Maybe we missed that opportunity, but overall the point of view was pretty nice, and the image in terms of like how I would do it differently, I think I wouldn't, in the sense that it's a good image, or a good looking image. Maybe just as I was saying, the framing should be maybe slightly different. There's one thing that is annoying, is that you can see that the leaves on the floor don't really match the trees, and here you have like 0 leaves, so you could expect to have maybe a bit more there, but nothing much. And maybe I think these guys are unnecessary, and this guy as well, because the idea is more you're already anchoring quite a lot here, and they're kind of like, you have all those diagonals leading your eye to this space, so you don't need additional children or kids here. They could have been put somewhere, maybe a bit further, but definitely not here, even though the idea was that we have this sort of like sitting system, but this was not the way to put it into practice in this image, I think. So yeah, that's all for this project. Couple of things that I think you can remember for it was really this idea of like how some composition can seem like they're working, but you need to really think through the placing of people, because sometimes they can completely change the aspect. And also just like the overall evolution, I think was interesting to show you, so that you can see like how sometimes it can work when you have like several phases. I'm currently working on another very big project, and I'm going to work on the next phase soon, and hopefully when I can release all the images, I can show you like the sort of evolution of the project over about 6 or 7 months it's been. So yeah, I hope you find the video interesting, and that you've learned some interesting little facts that you can potentially reuse in your next projects. And yeah, if you found this interesting, feel free to share it with other archviz artists, or to comment and like, etc. And I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.